Hi, and welcome to RealClearFetish Talks RealClearPlay, a podcast that dives into sobriety, kink, and everything in between. This is a little bonus episode I've set up to talk with the writers of this fantastic book, this study guide, Lost Men and Meth, which is a follow-on book from another book we also are going to talk about. So welcome, Dallas and David.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much for coming on with me. It's an absolute pleasure, and you are absolute two heroes of mine. I've been on your podcast, Dallas, which is the Aftermath, which is, I love the name of that podcast. It's great. And David, you're the main author of the original book, Lost Men and Meth, which is a book I read in early recovery and I absolutely adore. So having you both on is such a pleasure and such an honor. As this episode is pretty special, it's mainly to focus on the new study guide you've made, but also to learn a little bit about you both. So like with every episode I do, I start with 4 standard questions at the start, and then we'll just see where the conversation goes. So to start with, I'll go from you, Dallas, and down to you, David. So Dallas, names, pronouns, and title.
Dallas Bragg, he, him. And title is, what is my title? Host of the Aftermath podcast, and I have a chemsex recovery coaching program for men who have sex with men called Recovery Alchemy. And co-author of Lost Men and Meth, a study guide.
I see. Don't forget that.
Don't forget that. You have now a writing credit. Fantastic, isn't it?
Right.
And David, the same question for you.
I guess I would just say therapist, author, speaker, trainer. Those are kind of the roles that I'm maintaining right now, trying to do more training and talking and less one-to-one therapy. But I enjoy doing it all. I've been doing it for many years.
And pronouns, just to get that in there.
He, him, his.
Dallas, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a father of 2 adult children. So that's kind of a big role of mine. I have a history with crystal meth use and went through losing it all and homelessness and kind of rebuilt my life and noticed there was a gap in the recovery industry in terms of understanding chemsex. So I decided to do my own thing and fill the gap the best that I could. And so I have a program that really, what I see it as a transition of after treatment into therapy, and kind of that in-between space that gets dicey of, you leave therapy and you're just kind of put right back in the same environment. And so I kind of help men bridge that gap. Or it's men who are high functioning and just can't get away to treatment, or their job is they have to be very anonymous, like more anonymous than the 12-step anonymous. And so I help them have virtual treatment. And so I'm identified with my business right now. Pretty much, I don't do a lot, don't do a lot else right now. But I do have stress relief options in terms of my plants. I have a lot of house plants that I take care of, and I do a lot of nature walking and giving my energy to the trees. And my poor trees out back are just champs because they take all of my extra energy every day. So
I think it's very important that when we are in recovery, we find those things that alleviate stress and so on. We spent so many years using chemicals to alleviate stress and creating other stress. Mm-hmm. So it's nice to hear that you find love with plants. I have one. And then I have a couple of bits outside, but that's about it. That's as much as I can keep alive. And then I have some Lego plants.
Oh, okay. Nice.
And David, a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm a gay man in recovery from alcohol, not meth, but I've been in recovery for many, many years. Also living with HIV. And I say that because it's kind of an important piece of who I am and of the chemsex story in general, I think, to talk about. I started working with this as a sexologist, clinical sexologist, working with gay men coming to me with sexual problems. It turns out when you dug down a little bit, it was caused by meth. This is back in the 90s. And I started looking around. It kind of parallels to Dallas's experience of like, okay, what therapy has been written about this? What are the best practices clinically? What is there I can base anything on, there was nothing. So I just started kind of inventing my own protocols and dealing with these guys as, of course, another recovering human being, and it evolved from there. That really is the experience in that first book, Philosophy on Meth. But it's evolved ever since then, and I can tell you, unfortunately, in the United States, we still are kind of lagging behind in understanding chemsex, researching it, doing something about it. We have some areas where we shine, I think, in terms of clinical practices, but we have a lot to learn. So, but anyway, that's my goal now is to just train to fill the gap, I guess, at a professional level, much in parallel with what Dallas is doing.
It's one of the things when I talk to people in recovery and so on. It's that lack of having staff in professional roles that don't necessarily understand the lingo or what chemsex actually in essence is and so on. So having people like you out there helping the professionals to actually learn the language and know how to treat addiction is so important. So I'm very happy you're there, because even I've sat in the hospital and had to explain what PrEP is to a doctor. And that's scary. That shouldn't be like that. I'm not saying every doctor should have all the information. That's not what we're saying, but just the general knowledge, so you don't have to sit and explain yourself.
Exactly. Nothing inspires confidence like having to explain your problem to the person trying to help you, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a big problem.
Yeah.
My first early recovery therapist, when I mentioned the word BDSM, his eyes lit up with like bemusement, but also like, I can learn something here. I was like, well, you should be learning stuff from me. You should be helping me instead. So I definitely I recognize that.
If I may, Ralph, you just brought up a really important issue. Is a lot of the therapists that I work with who treat this are trained in substance abuse or substance misuse, but know nothing about sex or sex therapy or sexual health. And so they don't go there. They just kind of ignore those questions. And in chemsex, as you know, you have to talk about both sex and the drug use, right? You can't just talk about one piece of it. And they wonder why it doesn't work so well. So yeah, that's a big part of the training.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. Thank you for doing that kind of work. It's so important out there, especially at the moment, because it's so prevalent everywhere. Third question: completely sober, clear-headed, or social drinker? First, you, Dallas.
I would say social drinker, very selectively who I drink with and when I drink. Certain people and situations where I know it's a bad idea for me. But it doesn't really even happen that often just because I'm not happy with how I feel a lot of times after, but if I have dinner or a date or I'm with my kids, I'll have a glass of wine or bourbon or something like that. But just to kind of take the edge off, maybe. It's more of a I'm thinking too much. I'm making this a very long answer, but social drinker.
That's fine. Do you know what? The reason I asked that question is just for anyone watching and listening, is just to get a sense of who is the person we're talking to, what kind of recovery do they have, because there are so many different ways of doing it. And I think it's important to show you can do social drinking, and also give up meth. And I think that's really important, because sometimes, especially in early recovery, you get a little bit like, you have to give up everything. It's And for some people, that is absolutely the reality. I'm one of those people. I had to give up all substances because alcohol would lead me straight to meth. But that is not everyone's reality.
Right. That's right.
I'm going to ask you the same question, David, but you've already kind of answered it. But if you could just reiterate,
I'll just say I'm sober completely from alcohol. That's my primary drug of choice, if you will. But I also make a point not to take stimulants and not to do other kinds of drugs as well. So I come from kind of an old school 100% abstinence kind of days of alcohol use. And I think, frankly, alcohol sobriety is much easier than meth sobriety, to be honest. So yeah, but anyway, that's what I do.
Yeah, I think the only problem between like alcohol and meth is there's not commercials for meth everywhere, where alcohol there is, and they can be. I remember my first sober Christmas, and every other commercial on TV was alcohol, and that can be quite challenging for sure. So the last question: what is ClearPlay to you, and why is it important, Dallas?
Well, I think clear play, and I'm just learning myself. I took the first 5 years of my recovery and devoted them to my kids
Mm.
because I had neglected them for so many years. And so I was really tunnel vision. I need to get them through high school. One went into college, one in the trade, but I wanted to get them into their adult lives securely, be there for them, because ironically, their mother became an alcoholic when I was getting when I was getting over meth. So they don't have access to their mother right now. And so I was it. So I put kind of play to the side. And so in the last 2 years, well, year and a half, I've kind of been diving into. So I think it's important to prove to yourself that sober sex can be great. It can be actually it's a higher level, especially when you get into the to BDSM kink, the fetish world is so much consent, communication, safety, trust. The space that's created is one that you would never have in a chemsex scene. I know I didn't. And so I had a lot of kind of trauma to sift and sort through too about what had happened to me in the chemsex scenes and what gay men meant to me and what play meant to me and leather and all of that stuff. So to me, it's important to reclaim the impression in my head about what is fetish and kink and is it safe? Is that going to trigger me and those kinds of things. So to me, it's been an adventure of sticking my toe in of do I like this? Do I like that? It's rewriting kind of my arousal template too. And some things I did in meth I still enjoy.
Mm.
And so how do I reclaim that and couple that with what I also liked naturally into this new way of being sexually? So it's really an adventure. And I think clear play is about really redefining who you are. Because sexuality is everything, is all of, but really everything we do is, I think, sexuality. And so it's redefining what that means.
Yeah, it's so important when we start doing sober play after crystal meth use or chemsex use is to find out what was you and what was the drug.
Yeah.
And what can you find that you still like now you might have discovered whilst on crystal meth? And there's definitely things where, okay, I have to give that up.
Hmm.
That I still like, but I have to reclaim it in a very safe way and a controlled way and slow and so on. There's definitely the slightly darker side of my sexuality where it was so drenched in, weirdly enough, being on Zoom calls and using meth.
Yeah.
So I remember when lockdown happened, it took me 2 weeks to get my head around going on Zoom again to do
Mhm.
meetings with
Oh,
friends.
Right.
right.
Many people had that problem. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I deleted my account. I never thought I would ever use Zoom again. And here I am sitting with the two leading men, two of the leading men when it comes to chemsex, on a Zoom call in a very healthy manner. And it's just the world changes and you kind of have to figure that out. One of the things I haven't done and I've given up, I don't like doing cam stuff, which I like, some people like and so on, but that is just one step too far for me. But then it's about, like you say, exploring and finding out what works still for you. So David, you don't necessarily come from a point of chemsex, but what is clear play to you and why is it important?
Yeah, no, it's such a great question, and it's something to be conscious about and think about. And I'll say my answer to that, it's that it's evolved. I was, as a therapist, dealing with these guys in 30 years ago and plus with chemsex users trying to be in recovery, is that we were just afraid of behaviors, right? Old behaviors triggering a relapse. And so it was very black and white. And I will say, over the years, I really learned from my clients who pushed through the fear and
Mm.
actually reclaimed some of their behaviors that they enjoyed, some kinky behaviors, and integrated it into their recovery. And that was just such a beautiful experience. And I think that integration process, that word is so important in the whole process of real clear play, because we're staying present with the play. We're not disconnecting from it. We're not numbing ourselves to it or disconnecting in a way that separates us. And so many drugs do that. That we can be present. What a beautiful experience, right? And sober sex is just that. And one of the things I think we need to work on is just overcoming fear about re-engaging in sex, because that's just a natural, healthy part of who we are, including acknowledging some of those darker sides, as you say. I mean, that way all of us have those, right?
Mm.
And to not be afraid of those and to really talk about them in a healthy way.
Yeah, I think it's important that we like the biggest sexual organ we have is the brain and
Right.
fantasies and verbal and so on. Just because you have a fantasy in your head doesn't necessarily mean you're going to do it in reality, and that's fine. And it's about engaging with that kind of healthily. And you have light and you have dark sides. And I do think, like at least with crystal meth use, unfortunately, the dark sides can be amplified quite a lot. And your sense of right and wrong can kind of get lost a little bit. So, Dallas, in early recovery, when was your moment of like, I need to change to get out of this?
Before I quit,
Yeah,
or
before you quit.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell the story. There was a moment where it was at the end of whatever binge I was on, and I was sitting on a hotel bed beside, some guy, and there were two other guys, and we were all naked, but we were all doing this with our phone, right? Desperately, like we got to have another one. Four's not enough. You got to have five.
Mm,
Then the sun like came through the curtains of the hotel room and shone on my face, and I looked out and I heard the birds chirping, because anybody who knows, like when you hear the birds start to chirp, the party's over, right? And you gotta start thinking about, oh, I have responsibilities, I have to sleep, I have life. And I just looked out the window at the sun. I was like, you know what? This is not what I want anymore. Like I'm done. Like I can't do this. This has turned into something that's just not fun anymore. And I just looked around at three other zombies and I was like, I don't belong here.
mm,
And that was really the first time in my heart, like I decided I wasn't, this is not a part of me anymore. That wasn't the last time I used though. But for me, I count that as my day one. I did, there was a delay. Like, of course, I used a few more times. Of course, there's something in you that's like, well, let me try one more. It's euphoric recall, or let me just have one last hurrah. It's going to be a good one, and it never ended up. It wasn't a good one. It was tragic, actually, the last part of it, because the last use was I returned to Charlotte and I got some of this new super meth that they call it, this new meth that's here, that's a
mm,
cartel lab grade. And no one kind of warned me, and I injected a bunch of it, and that was really the one time went psychotic,
mm,
um, and just found the police officer and turned myself in.
mm,
Because I happen to have an APB on an APB out there for my arrest. Anyway, it was just a decision, right? And yeah, I used a couple times, and that last time was the final. But
mm,
my heart just wasn't in it after that. And like when you're done, you just know, and you have to kind of rise above the physical act of relapse to say, okay, I did this, but I still am done. Like this is not me anymore. Like you can tell when there's a there's there's a healthy guilt that comes when you have acted out of alignment against who you are and your values. And it switched over from shame to guilt for me. And I knew like this is not me. I'm doing this, but it is not me. There was just a difference in the consciousness of it. I know it's another long answer to your question,
This is what
but
the podcast is for. It's for these stories, and
yeah,
I think it's also really important. It's like it humanizes you. You're not a man behind the text.
yeah,
You're equal to what I've been through. You're equal to what David went through. Whoever might be listening, kind of going, "Oh yeah, I've done that.
mm,
That's
mm.
crazy." So the drug you mentioned, is that what you would call monkey dust? Is that the
No,
supercharged one?
no.
No.
In the U.S., the Biden administration like did away with the production of Sudafed, or correct me if I'm wrong here, David. But basically, the homegrown labs were put out of business,
Mm.
and so the demand shifted to the Mexican cartel labs, and so this new meth is very pure.
Oh,
It's like high grade and it's cheaper.
God.
And so most of what the DEA is capturing now is that. So that's what we know is kind of in the system. And it's actually, it does lead to psychotic breaks, paranoia faster and stronger, and actually some permanent. And it lasts longer. It's just a higher quality than what we had. And I happened to be in a very rural town trying to get sober, quote unquote, and I was using what they call shake and bake, which was something somebody was making somewhere, and maybe their
In a
oven or something.
bathtub somewhere, yeah,
In the
Breaking
bathtub.
Bad style, yeah.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And so when I went down, I just had I injected it, and it was days of confusion for me. Just I didn't know what city I was in. They had kicked me out of the hotel room, out of the car onto the street, and I was roaming around, just confused. And I finally saw a police officer, and I didn't know what else to do. I needed to sleep and eat. So that was my final draw there. But even if that hadn't have happened, I knew I was on my way out. And
Mm,
that's what I tell guys is you have to keep saying, even if you do use, I'm on my way out of this. Like if I used at least over the last, let's say 2 months, have you used less than the previous 2 months?
mm.
Like you are on your way out of it. I promise. You just have to kind of rise above the actual relapse, the physical part, and know that in your heart, you're done. You're done because you will find a way. And I think that was the universe's way of lifting me out of it.
We just had Easter, and I went to Berlin for Easter, and a guy I know there relapsed whilst I was there, and he was very apologetic afterwards and so on. And I was just like, apologize to the people you need to apologize for. That's fine. You don't have to apologize to me. The only thing I ask is look at what you've done and see what you can do better next time.
Mhm. Mhm.
Don't get down on yourself about this. It's a progressive illness. It's you just fall in, and it's a part of the journey of it, like you just said. And yes, apologize to the people you feel like, but I feel like sometimes the apology is more for yourself, not necessarily for the people you've hurt, and that's fine. But it's just about what do you do next? What is the next step? And I think that's the important bit. Not so much apologizing to everyone. It's more what can you do for yourself to make yourself better? And I think that's really important. So, David, you've written 2 other books before we get to the main feature of the episode. You did Lost Men and Meth 10 years ago, which is a fantastic book. And last year you did Sex Under the Influence, which is one I'm yet to read, I must admit, but I will get to reading it because it does sound very good. How did you get onto the journey of writing these books?
Yeah. So I think, as I mentioned, I was really aware there was nothing out there for clinicians trying to work with this. This is back in the early 2000s. So I felt it was valuable to write a book like that, but not just by the way of professionals. It's also meant for the user. And I think the book has had more impact on people experiencing, and I've gotten hundreds, thousands of emails from guys over the years from around the world saying, your book, I saw myself in your book. And that was what I tried to do is, although I'm not a meth user myself, as I said, I had so many hours, thousands of hours with guys working with them clinically. I kind of felt some of the issues of, internalized homophobia and shame and trauma and all the things that really feed that the addiction is really a coping mechanism to deal with, right? I mean, it helps us deal with life. And then part of our, I think, getting better is we need to build other systems to do that. But that was the goal of the first book. And then I must admit, it becomes a bit of a compulsion, like a drug. And once you write a book, I think it's really, you want to write another one. It's a bit of a dopamine rush, adrenaline too. So, but there's another message that I felt was important for Sex Under the Influence. And that was, I was working in Los Angeles and seeing a lot of chemsex users who were not men who have sex with men, but who were heterosexual men. And in the United States, that's a really big growing phenomenon of heterosexuals falling into methamphetamine, and guess what? Starting to have sex with other men, with transgender sex workers. Their whole world expands. So it's just kind of this homogenization. And I think one of the things a message I think I'm going to carry forward, and I've kind of come to the conclusion that the chemsex isn't so much about who does it, but it's about a coping mechanism that really a lot of people can use, right? And do and abuse, I should say. But yeah, so that was the message. And then the third book, the one we're talking about today, was really I needed to update the first one. It's been 10 years, as you noted. I've learned a lot since then. I want to talk about that, but also I had come across Dallas, who might be talking about more about how that happened. But I felt, boy, this could be a wonderful collaboration because he's bringing a slightly different viewpoint, slightly different set of skills, and the two of us, fortunately, have worked really well together. And so I think it shows in the book.
Yeah, it's talking about the new book, of course, which is a study guide, which is a self-contained thing as well, but it's an updating of some of the texts in the original book. And I remember Dallas telling me that he'd mentioned I had a note on the original one about it not necessarily catering too much to the kink community, where I felt a little bit like that was missing a little bit. But in this book, if you can tell on the camera, there's now a kink section, which I read, and I was so happy when I read it. It's a little paragraph, but do you know what? I almost burst into tears when I read it, because it was one of the things. I loved the original book, but there was just that one little thing where it's just like, oh, I didn't feel quite represented in it. A lot of the experiences are the same, but was just that little tweak. So when I found out this was in the book, I was just like, yes. But also really nervous to meet you the first time, because you don't really go up to an author that's like, oh, I have notes.
Some people do.
Some people do, yeah.
Oh, I've had people come up to me and make notes about my podcast where I'm just like, that's a bit like, okay, fine. But you were so kind, and it was just like, well, I'm not going to improve it if I don't get told these things. And I was just like, great, fantastic. And I felt so much better for it.
No, it's valuable feedback, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm so glad that little section is in there, and I have a smidgen of a little bit of like I may have made that happen. So that was really, really nice. So yep. Dallas, how did you meet David, and how did the book come about?
Mm-hmm. Well, I indirectly met David early on in my recovery. I went to drug court. Obviously, I just said I was turned myself into authorities. I had 4 felony charges, drug possession. I was a terrible dealer. I tried to be a dealer, but I just kept getting caught with it over and over. But I went to drug court, so I was seeing a judge every other week, and a caseworker and a probation officer and something else. And then I was also in treatment, and I had counselors. No one had heard of chemsex. Of course, chemsex really wasn't even I guess it was a word at the time, but not known. But they were very ill-equipped to help me. It was the same thing as you were saying earlier, is I had to educate everyone on what it's like to be a gay man, and this world that was going on around them with crystal meth. A lot of them didn't even know what grinder was, at the time. And so I just felt isolated and unseen. I was, sitting in a room with a lot of heterosexual men and women who were using marijuana or alcohol or heroin. There was maybe 1 or 2 that came in with meth. They're straight men that didn't use it like I'd used it. So I was just looking for some way to find someone else in my shoes, someone that I could relate to. And so when I Googled and tried to find resources, David popped up. So David's book popped up, and David had a podcast at the time that I would listen to. And so it really helped reach in and make me feel a part of something, a part of something bigger. And so then I started searching for other people like me. And so that was early on, and I just followed him along the way. And then when I made my podcast, I had to have him on. And so I indirectly networked my way in and met him that way, and had him on the podcast a couple times.
Really nice guy.
Yeah. So with my group, I started a study guide, a book study. And so I wanted to ask his permission, and then I contacted him, and then just out of the blue, he came back and said, would you want to collaborate on an actual study guide? And of course I was over the moon. He's like, yes, where do I sign? So that's how we met.
So how did you decide what to do in this book? Because of course there's the updated texts, which I'm assuming you've written, David. But then there's later in the book there's like writing sections. How did that come about, and how did you choose what to put in?
Well, I had created a lot of that material for my guys already.
Mm,
So it was an easier transition. And then I wanted to I wanted to write a chapter on because I saw that men in early recovery from chemsex, it's hard to say, study this, read this and
mm.
study it, right? Sometimes the brain can't really focus, or sometimes there's a lot of neurospicy men who are
I
in.
have ADHD, and I will get to it
Yeah.
eventually. I will want to go through it
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah.
but it will be at my own pace. It's
Yeah.
just what it
And we
is.
will have an audiobook, by the way, which is often easier for people to
Yeah.
Do you know
absorb.
what? I'll jump on that right away. That would work really well for me. So
Yeah.
that's really good to
Yeah.
hear.
That's
Good.
in the works.
So I just wanted a chapter giving you options on how to use it, how you
Mm,
utilize it. Maybe like when you read it for questions. When you read it and you learn something, share that. Maybe on social media or with your group. What can I make this? Read a paragraph at a time and just use that as a journal prompt all week. Just using ways of just instead of just here's a study guide, here are questions, do them, is how can I integrate this and what are
mm.
some different ways based on how I learn that I can, it doesn't seem so overwhelming to me. So I wanted to write the chapter on how to use the study guide.
And
And then
David,
I
when you started uh, to update the book, how did you go about figuring out what do I need to update? What do I need to add from 10 years ago till to now?
been keeping notes kind of over the years as things occur to me. And I went through it again with kind of a fine tooth comb and just made notes of where, for example, HIV science has evolved a lot in 10 years and
Mm,
neuroscience as well. And my own perspective has evolved over 10 years. So there's been a lot of kind of updates in that regard. But I think what kind of opened up in this workbook or study guide is more of a broader lens than just I got sober in 12 step, which is much more popular in North America than Europe, I know, but it's kind of it's the dominant way to get sober here. Tragically, I think to the exclusion of many other good ways. But I
mm.
think, in my own perspective over the years, has broadened. And that's why I thought it was so great to work with Dallas because he came from a slightly different way, as I mentioned. So just broadening the lens and trying to update it and make it relevant, acknowledging. I know there's a huge, just now we're discovering research-wise the correlation to ADHD and chemsex and neurodiversity and ink and all these kind of just around the edges that I didn't really have time to deal with before. So we wanted to just broaden it, make it more universal.
It is a fantastic thing to have this now, and I know there's going to be a lot of people who can really use these kind of things. Would you say the book works 100% on its own, or would you need to dip into the original book to kind of get some of the stuff?
It's a great question, and thank you. I was going to mention that. Right. We wanted, although it's a study guide that is directly correlated to the first book, it also a standalone study guide. So you don't have to have the other book, you have to buy the other book. What I did was go through and kind of create a summary of each chapter, and then there are sort of 10 kind of takeaways from each chapter. So you can really get a good sense of the message, the important things that are worthy to think about and write about, for really just by going through the study guide on its own. You don't need the first book. I would say your experience would be richer if you did the first book, but by all means, it's not necessary.
It's the original book is the extended cut.
Exactly. Exactly.
And Dallas, you said you kind of work the study guide with your own group. So would you say this is a good tool for group work as well?
Oh yeah.
We see like with Smart Recovery, that's very much a group kind of setting. So would you think a book like this could really work with Smart Recovery?
Oh yeah. I think you work with any recovery. Smart, Dharma, just your own group, treatment
Mm.
centers, you know, book clubs,
Yeah, book study groups,
book study.
all that.
Yeah. You could really do a lot with it, I think. In my opinion, it could be anything for sure.
Did you test out the book in its early stages with your own group to kind of go, okay, this is what we're putting in. What do you think about that? And so on. A little bit like a feedback.
I did. I use my group for a lot of free marketing research, since they are the avatars. But yeah, we sent it out and had a lot of the clients review it and give actually a lot of their clients gave blurbs, endorsements in the front cover too. But yeah, we tried it out. And I also do a yearly now, an annual book study of the original book. And so I've altered it. We're doing it now. Actually, we just started it. I've altered it to include the study guide and those questions in it. And so that, that it's something to go, you can keep going back through over and over, on the original book too. It's pretty much timeless
Mm.
because the way he's written it, the way David wrote it that's why it continues to go on and on and on after 10 years is it still stands the test of time. And there's really not many resources out there like it, if any.
It is quite extraordinary that there is not more of this kind of literature out there, it's so important it's out there. So I'm very grateful that it's there, and I will. I have a recovery group within the chorus I sing in. I sing with Alana Gibbons chorus. I might even suggest that if anyone is interested, we can go through it together for the people who would be relevant for. But then again, addiction is addiction. So a lot of the things will span and you would understand it anyway. So just jumping a little bit back to this book, David. So what prompted you to kind of explore this a little bit more? Because I think it's really interesting to see a book that says sex under the influence and understanding and healing. What brought on to write this book? Because I think this is quite fascinating.
Yeah. So as I said, I was working in Los Angeles, not with men who have sex with men, but with just general men, right? Some of whom were MSM, but most of whom were not. And working with them in a substance abuse and compulsive sexual setting, treating those two things, pornography, compulsive sex, and substances. Some of them had substance issues. But I learned a whole lot. All these books are reflections of what I learned from my work, right? And they taught me so much about, as I mentioned before, how heterosexuals are doing this behavior as well. But I also learned a great deal about some of the recovery tools on the so-called sex addiction side that I'd never even heard of as a substance abuser in recovery, right? Things like the circle plan and different 12-step 3-second rules and 12-second rules. And there's tools that help people who are dealing with compulsive sex and porn with maybe no drug issue at all, help them deal with it because it's a slightly different thing, right? It's easy to say with substances, I can just, okay, I'm an alcoholic. I'll never have alcohol again, hopefully, in my life. I don't want to say that about, if I'm a compulsive sexual person with that problem, I'm not going to give up sex. We want to learn how to integrate sex back in. So the set of tools are slightly different for this compulsive sex side. And I also had, and I thought this was totally relevant to chemsex. They deal much more with fantasy, which is also a big element of, as you mentioned, of chemsex and the chemsex experience. And so, okay, what do we do? Fantasy is also a normal part of human sexuality, but when does fantasy get kind of dicey, right? In my own recovery, and when does it not? And so tools to kind of evaluate that. So I thought it was a new set of stuff. And I thought it would be useful to write that up. So about half that book, Sex Under the Influence, is really new tools that I'd learned over my years out there.
It's interesting because I talk to a lot of different people on different ways of recovering and experiences and so on. And one of the things I find is there is a continuous of the all of a sudden chemsex use becomes a fetish in itself. And how far can you get out? How high can you get? I was definitely like, it became a fetish for me. And the ritual of injecting and stuff like that. And when you become sober, you have to uncode that. And I'm coming up to 9 years this September, and having blood drawn is an ordeal, absolute ordeal for me. How have you decoded that, Dallas, where you're at in your recovery? I could see your face is a little bit like, ooh, this is a tough topic, and I can tell that triggers something for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, it took me a while. I would have a complete breakdown
Yeah.
with blood drawn. Time to get my blood drawn. And I contracted HIV during my meth use, and so I have to get my blood drawn every 3 months. So it took me first. I had to have somebody go with me,
Mm,
and then it's eventually, slowly, it didn't bother me as much. I didn't watch and that kind of thing. The thing about injecting is, from my observations and from my personal experience, that feeling is imprinted somewhere in my body, and my body has stored that
mm,
as trauma, I think. And so even after, for me, it'll be 8 years in August, there's still times when that image comes to my mind. We all know what that image is,
mm.
and my body reacts the same as if it did if it was 8 years ago. Increased heartbeat, I cough, get the cold. I mean, everything, every sensation somatically comes. And so I'm looking at well, not maybe, I'm looking at fascia release treatment because I'm wondering if it's stored in my tissue somehow because it's so visceral after all these years. And so I think of us who injected have a different type of hurdle or a different type of challenge or opportunity, I guess is the best way in our recovery. Not that it's harder than anyone else, but it is different and unique because that flash, it's almost as if it's a PTSD for me. Sometimes in the twilight of laying down for a nap or getting ready for sleep, the image, I guess my prefrontal goes offline and that image pops up and my body reacts and it feels like I just did it. It's discombobulating, but less now, after these years, less now. But it's unexpected. I'll be at the gym and I'll see things popping out and my mind goes there. And it's years later. So I just think it's a matter of what you say to yourself. I'm safe. Breathe, touch your heart, breathe. I'm safe. I didn't use. This is just a memory, right? This is just a sensation in my body. That's all it is. There's nothing going on here. There's nothing serious here, and there's no reason to panic. And it's not a reflection of how well I'm doing in my recovery. It's not a moral, failing. There's nothing, there's no statement here about me and how well I'm doing. It's just a sensation in my body.
Yeah, it's funny when you talk about like just before sleep. Like I can lie in my bedroom all in the dark and then all of a sudden my whole body just like an image pops in, like the needle or whatever, the action of it. And it's so powerful, so visceral. And it's also like the aftermath of that. If I focus too much on it, it comes with so much shame as well. And it's not something I have any control over. And when I talk to people in early recovery, I'm just like, does it ever go away? Just like, well, I'm coming up to 9 years. I still get it. I hope it gets less and less. It happens less frequently, but it's definitely moments of high stress at work or high stress in private life. And that's when my body goes in, okay, we need to give him a little bit of alleviation. So we'll throw a bunch of our endorphins, but just slightly in the wrong way. Bad memories. So it's interesting when you mention like going to bed, because that is normally when it happens to me. You just lying there trying to fall asleep, and then all of a sudden it's like slamming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, it does. I just think that may never change, but your response to it can evolve.
Mm,
Was gonna say, I have similar but less probably encoded things that over the years, and what my experience, they still pop up, by the way, after
Mhm.
I've been sober 40 some years this year. But it's more
congratulations.
like kind of, thank you. It's more like kind of a grayed out option, like you see on the computer sometimes where you can't click on it. It's
Mm,
there, I see it, but it doesn't have the power. And
mm.
I have no interest in going there. I just go to option B. So but I think it's encoded as Dallas. I think it's just like trauma. It sits in our nervous system. We can release it. I use breath work to release mine, but there are ways to deal with it. But I think it's always going to kind of be there, but be much less powerful.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the message of this. It's like, yes, it's going to be there, but it's like you said, it depends on how you react to it. I think as addicts, we're quite reactive people, but I think that with more recovery and the more we learn, the less reactive we become, and we think more about consequence as well. And that, I think that's an important bit of, like, you can fast forward what the result of your actions are going to be. So yes, you want to, but you know what the end thing is going to be, like drama and lack of sleep and just feeling shit about it, really. But
I
yeah,
tell my
it's
clients, chemsex has a great trailer, right? All the high points and how wonderful it's going to be, but the actual film, not so good. It kind of leaves out a lot of those parts. So go to the end of the movie, but don't pay attention to the trailer because it's going to lie to you, basically.
that's a really good comparison. So I was lucky enough to meet you both. How long did it go? 5, 6 weeks ago now.
Not more
Time
than
goes so
that.
time goes so quick. You had the book launch here in London, which was such a joy, and get to actually meet you both in person. David, the first thing you said to me is like, "Yeah, I'm really tall," and I was just like, "Yeah, you are. Yeah, but yeah, great."
If I was following 10,000 comments
Right.
by people as
Yeah.
many saying, "Boy, are you tall?" It's like just cut that. Let's move on, right?
Yeah,
But
right.
yeah, you can't tell
But
that
you
on
were you
Zoom.
were you were lucky enough to be in Antwerp for a chemsex conference. How was that? And it was at the same time as Darklands as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
The last day of the conference was the first day of Darkwood, so it was an interesting intersection there. For me, the conference was just awesome because I feel still like I'm kind of doing this work in a very lonely place. That's why collaborations are so important.
Mm.
But there's not many of us, and so to be in a room full of several hundred people who kind of get it, much as we were talking before about a therapist that gets it, right? To these other people, researchers, therapists, clinicians, public health workers, they understand, and that was just wonderfully refreshing and inspiring for me.
How about you, Dallas? How did you find the conference?
Yeah, much of the same. Just finding, the networking part was probably the best part in terms of just meeting people from all over the world that I had talked to, some on the podcast and some just through mail listservs or LinkedIn or whatever. But just to really, it's amazing to me that no matter where you are in the world, the nature of chemsex is practically the same. And it could be monkey dust or it could be methadone or it could be methamphetamine, GHB, but the nature of it, the reasons why and what you do while you're in it and the recovery really is so similar, no matter on the globe where you are. I mean, there's different challenges culturally, different things
Mm.
like that. But that was refreshing to kind of get a broader view of, this is everywhere. And how can we work together to and we can easily work together because we're facing some of the same challenges and we can meet those challenges in the same way. I learned a lot too, obviously, I mean, it really confirmed and solidified my belief in harm reduction and its use and its benefit, in particular with chemsex.
Yeah, harm reduction. I think in early recovery, I was not as vocal about harm reduction as because I was focusing on my own recovery, of course. But now that I've gotten to a point where I've had many a discussion with my mum because my mum is like, drugs are evil, and I'm just like, well, some people can still have fun on them. That's the thing. Not everyone ends up like your son,
Right.
and she doesn't quite believe me when I say that. But I can understand her because she has the trauma of having me with a drug psychosis on the phone at 2 in the morning. So I
Yeah.
get her point of view. But harm reduction is both it because recovery is a journey. It's about giving you the tools so you don't die along the way. If you're not ready to give up, you're not going to stop. So let's give you the tools so you don't kill yourself.
Mhm.
And this is the horrible truth of it. People do die from it, and it's and one of the things, like, a lot of people talk about higher power in 12 step, and I'm not necessarily a big believer in higher power, but I do use a central person as my kind of my totem. I had a friend who passed away of an overdose, and I kind of used them as my, like, I do this because they couldn't.
Mm.
And I think that could be quite powerful. So if you don't like the word higher power, just find something you can cling to or use as power for yourself. And that's really important. So we are coming slowly to the end of the episode. It's been absolute joy. So just to round the episode off, what made you choose to do the book launch in London?
I think a couple of reasons. One, the adjacent time frame with the chemsex conference in Antwerp. There's a lot of interest. I think, the word chemsex, talked to our mutual friend David Stewart, right? He's the one that
Yeah,
coined that term in 2013 or 14. Really, London was the ground zero for chemsex. It still is in many ways. And
yeah,
so Dallas, I know, has a lot of listeners and fans there. I do. And so it just seemed like kind of a fun thing, and just a kind of a wonderful thing too, to kind of, in a way, I felt like it was kind of bringing it home to London, and kind of meeting our friends there.
yeah. It was such a lovely evening, and I got to meet a lot of people from like my early days. Robert, who's this beautiful tall redhead, he was the first person I ever interacted with in early recovery. Not necessarily when I was ready to start, but he was like the first person I met at check-in at one of their clinics. He took my notes and he's like, "You have to come back every week for 3 weeks before we give you a key worker," and so on. So he it was amazing seeing him there. So Dallas, how did you find doing the book launch in London?
We do have, I mean, I do have a lot of uh, followers and contacts and friends there in London, and I just for me, and like David said, my philosophy is a bit unconventional in terms of the mainstream US identified and accepted recovery system. And so it just kind of fits in better in the Europe, or easier. I
Mm,
think eventually we'll get it over here in terms of chemsex recovery. I think it just requires a specific type of shift in what we believe. So I found it so welcoming and comfortable, very just easy
Yeah.
and
mm.
organic, and that I really like that. Very very much just I felt like I knew everyone already, and it was just nice. Yeah.
Well, I was happy you were here doing it because I got to meet you both, and I've been on your podcast, Dallas, which was an absolute joy to get on there and talk for an hour. So just to round the episode off, where can, if people have listened or watched and they've really connected with something, either you said, Dallas, or you, David, where can they get a hold of you, Dallas?
So I'm on all social media outlets that you can think of, at Dr. Dallas Bragg. I don't, it depends on when this will air, but probably by the time this airs, my website will be recoveryalchemy.org. Yeah, .org, not .com. Recoveryalchemy.org. I'm doing a rebranding, so I'm moving things away from my name and more program centric.
Mm.
Um, just because I want the program to be standalone without identifying specifically with me. So recoveryalchemy.org is my website, and soon will be the handle on all the social medias at some point. So that's where you can reach me. And the Aftermath podcast. Yeah.
Of course, go and check his podcast out. It's amazing. And you, David?
Yeah, I have a website, david-fawcett.com, and it's Fawcett. And then on social media, I'm doing little videos and things like on TikTok and Instagram. That's usually David Fawcett Chemsex. They just search that, they'll find it.
Fantastic. And just the last two questions I'll give to both of you. First question, as this is a fetish podcast, Dallas, do you have a favorite piece of fetish gear?
I don't have much gear yet. I have worn a mask, and I've had someone else wear a mask, ski mask. Did do that. What else have I done? I don't want to list all the things I've done, but I don't.
Oh, we
Um,
don't. That's a whole other episode.
I do have. I have had somebody locked up in a cage, penis cage, whatever you call them.
Got cage, yeah.
Cock cage, yeah, I did. Yeah, I've dabbled in that too. So I've dabbled in like me as the dom, and then me as the sub, and then everything in between. I'm just kind of I want to experience each thing and just kind of see what hits and what doesn't. So far I don't know that I can say that I am one or the other, or I'm this or that. I'm just still experimenting.
Fantastic. Well, you're a lot further along than since we did the podcast, because you were still
Yeah, that's true.
very, it's like not really doing anything yet, and
Yeah.
this is definitely
Yeah.
leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
And you're approaching it correctly, because you need to experience both sub and dom, because you
Yeah.
can't
Maybe I'm a
appreciate
switch.
both. That's
Yeah,
the
maybe I'm
thing.
a switch. Yeah.
What about you, David? Do you have any hidden fetish gear you would share with us?
Yeah, I actually have a harness. I have a vest. Used to have a few other things, gloves and things. I don't think I have those anymore. But my partner had gone to IML a couple of years in a row, and just more, and for me, it's more about less about the gear and more about just the whole experience in the community. I just kind of wanted to feel that energy, and I really enjoy that energy. Although I'm not in it a lot these days.
And just to round the episode off, if you had a piece of advice you would bestow to anyone, that can be any walks of life or recovery and so on, what would that be, Dallas?
Well, I think if you're interested in quitting, interested in kind of a new life, I would. The first thing I always say is tell someone that you haven't told yet that you're struggling with it, because this chemsex lives in the dark, and part of the allure sometimes is that it's your secret little life, and there's stigma and there's shame, and oftentimes your friends and your family don't know. They know that you're hard to reach often, and they don't know what you're doing. And so I think telling someone, just breaking that fear and making it known actually is so liberating, and a weight will be lifted. And it's a step forward to total quitting. So that's my big advice. If you're really just overwhelmed with what to do next or what to do first, that's what I would say.
Fantastic. And you, David?
Yeah, I think a couple of messages. One is that you're not alone if you're in this room. I think so many people feel they're the only ones. There's no one out there that can really identify, and that's not true, right? You're not alone. But also, I think to break this myth about recovery, and whatever recovery means, recovery is possible, right? You can get past this. Like, so many people are hopeless about it. I think just they need to go out and connect with other people, men, women, whoever, who are on the same journey, and really that it can be done. I think sometimes we get so down and negative about it, our vision kind of closes and we don't see the possibilities. So hope and believe in yourself and know that recovery is possible.
That is absolutely true. Recovery is possible, and it just takes a lot of work sometimes, but the work is worth it. And having people like you out there helping others is amazing. And I really hope you keep going with what you're doing, because it helps so many people around the world, and it's helped me. So I'm very grateful to that. So it's been absolute joy to have you both on. It's been lovely to chat to you both. And yeah, it's been great.
Thank you. It's been
Likewise.
lovely being here. Thank you for having me.
And that was this week's episode, my little special bonus episode of season 10 to focus on this fantastic study guide. Go out and buy it, read it, check out the other books as well. They're all on Amazon, so you can go on them, buy them, and probably also other book outlets. So go and check these books out, especially this one. It's fantastic. Thank you for watching, listening. Go out and have fun. Recovery is possible, and you are loved. So, bye.